They warned us the ocean might turn sour, but nobody believed it would happen so quickly. These startling words, spoken by a longtime deep-sea researcher, could signal a turning point in our understanding of what is happening beneath the waves. But is this alarm overstated, or have we truly crossed a dangerous threshold for countless marine creatures? Today, we dive into the hidden depths of ocean acidification, a phenomenon that has quietly but surely taken hold of nearly half our planet's surface waters, leaving many shell-building species teetering on the brink. In this episode, we unravel the critical details behind these sobering scientific findings and explore how the very chemistry of our waters is changing at a pace few ever predicted. What exactly is the problem that has scientists sounding the alarm? Put simply, as humankind continues to release carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, the ocean absorbs part of it, about 1/4 of our total emissions. But this natural carbon sponge effect, once hailed as a saving grace, is quietly backfiring. We are venturing into the realm of ocean acidification, and this shift has huge implications for marine life. Today, we will delve into the truly eye-opening data that reveals how 40% of the global surface ocean is already severely compromised, and how nearly 60% of ocean waters down to 200 meters deep have been irrevocably altered. We will also examine the dramatic consequences for some of our most beloved and economically important marine species, creatures that rely on specific ocean chemistry to keep their shells and skeletons intact. In other words, if you thought ocean acidification was just a buzzword, think again. In this program, we are going to unravel the scientific data, follow the path of key discoveries, and see just how deeply this issue connects to our daily lives. In this immersive journey, we will discuss how the shells of tiny pteropods, also known as sea butterflies, are literally dissolving around them, sapping the energy they need to survive. We will explore failing shellfish hatcheries in the Pacific Northwest, once thriving epicenters of oyster and mussel production for human consumption, that were forced to start buffering their water just to keep the next generation of mollusks alive. We will also examine the plight of fragile coral reefs that have, by some estimates, lost over 40% of their suitable habitat. From the polyp-building corals in the tropics to king crabs in the subpolar regions, the list of marine species affected by rising ocean acidity goes on and on. And in case you imagine these changes are relegated only to exotic corners of the sea, we will reveal how the stretch of coastline from Canada down to Mexico has already witnessed alarming transformations in deeper waters. Plus, new research points to ocean acidification as one possible culprit behind population declines of the famed red king crab in the Bering Sea. Taken together, these facts underscore a sweeping oceanic crisis whose ultimate outcome remains uncertain. Let us begin from a vantage point many of us do not usually see: the ocean's carbon chemistry, which is built around the delicate balance of pH levels, carbonate ions, and the presence of mineral forms such as aragonite. The story might sound arcane, but it is, in truth, a high-stakes drama happening every moment. When carbon dioxide merges with seawater, it forms carbonic acid, which then splits into hydrogen ions and bicarbonate. An increase in hydrogen ions reduces the availability of carbonate ions, the vital ingredient for calcifying organisms to build shells and skeletons out of calcium carbonate. Imagine for a moment a region rich in coral reefs teeming with dazzling tropical fish. All that vibrancy depends on stable pH levels that allow corals to secrete their supporting structures. When acidity goes up, corals strain to keep their hard exteriors from dissolving. That same story echoes across oyster beds, clam nurseries, and the deeper waters where sea snails and some crustaceans dwell. Ocean acidification is not just a single species problem or a local anomaly. It is a global event that stretches from surface waters down into the deeper zones. If you find these revelations startling, consider showing your support by tapping that like button to help spread the word. After all, many people remain unaware that ocean acidification is expanding like an invisible tide, weakening marine habitats and imperiling local economies. By sharing or liking, you can help raise the alarm so that more listeners realize the significance of what is unfolding. But let us not stop at pteropods and corals. The coastlines of the Pacific Northwest, famed for their shellfish farms, have seen major upheavals over the last decade, as hatchery-bred oysters struggle to survive in water drawn from the surrounding ocean. The owners of these hatcheries, upon discovering the culprit to be lower pH levels, began buffering their incoming water to recreate more stable conditions. This adaptive measure played a key role in saving the industry from collapse, but also acted as a canary in the coal mine, revealing the vulnerability of these marine life stages. While buffering might work on a small scale, it is hardly a fix for entire oceans. As we zoom out to the bigger picture, we see how stunted oysters or dissolving snail shells fit into a mosaic of challenges that unify the struggles of creatures as diverse as mussels, crabs, corals, and other high-value marine species. The data emerges from numerous studies, some spanning entire decades, building a robust scientific consensus. First, an international team that included NOAA researchers concluded that since the pre-industrial era, the saturation state of aragonite has dropped by around 1/5 in surface waters for almost half of our global oceans. That is not a minor fluctuation. Acidification is now within range of pushing certain species past their tipping points, compromising the stable environments these organisms need. As we delve below, the numbers are no less shocking. Nearly 60% of subsurface waters, down to 200 meters, have also undergone similarly profound shifts in aragonite saturation. The biggest changes in surface water have occurred in polar regions, where colder water naturally absorbs more carbon dioxide, intensifying acidification. Meanwhile, deeper waters along the west coast of North America have endured the brunt of these modifications, placing the ecosystem's resilience to the test. Looking into specific species, corals in tropical and subtropical regions have lost nearly half of the comfortable habitats in which they can robustly deposit calcium carbonate. Picture a coral reef once ablaze with colors, which is now forced to spend far more energy maintaining basic structural integrity. What does that mean for the brilliant fish, the sponges, and the countless species that congregate in reefs? It means a dissolving network of biodiversity. Meanwhile, pteropods, tiny snails vital to polar food webs, are losing over half of their prime waters, leaving entire marine food chains in flux. Coastal shellfish, pillars of many local fisheries, now face an environment diminished by 13% of hospitable coastline. Ultimately, every link in the chain from single-celled plankton to apex predators depends on stable pH conditions, so there is no telling how vast the ripple effects might become. But do these changes affect more than those remote coral reefs and high-latitude pteropods? Absolutely. Researchers now suspect that ocean acidification has played a pivotal role in declines of the famed Bristol Bay red king crab, a species that supports a valuable commercial fishery and holds cultural importance. The Bering Sea red king crab fishery endured an unprecedented closure from the middle of the second decade of this century until roughly the midpoint of the current decade due to dire stock assessments. Then, it reopened in the latter part of 2023 with a significantly pared-down quota. What caused these precipitous drops in population? Scientists from NOAA's laboratories set out to verify whether sea ice loss, warming water, or acidification might be to blame. Their findings suggest that heightened acidity could explain about 21% of the crab population decline during a lengthy window spanning from the 1980s to just a few years ago. Even more haunting, acidification might account for around 45% of the overall decline since the turn of the millennium. While multiple factors undoubtedly converge in these complex environments, the correlation is too strong to ignore. In a separate line of investigation, NOAA-led research in 2020 zeroed in on Dungeness crab, a highly prized crustacean along the west coast. The study revealed how larval stages of Dungeness crab are not only threatened with shell erosion, but also show potential damage to key sensory organs. This is a real-world example of how subtle shifts in water chemistry can translate into a weakened ability for marine life to feed, navigate, or protect itself from predators. The ultimate result? Populations stand on precarious ground, leaving fishermen and local economies with tough prospects. It is essential to understand how ocean acidification compounds other stresses. Overfishing, marine pollution, rising ocean temperatures, and changing currents are just a few stressors that species already contend with. Add a shift in pH, and the puzzle becomes even more complicated. As creatures dedicate more energy to shell building or coping with corrosive waters, they have fewer resources to invest in reproduction, foraging, or migration. Bit by bit, compromised populations begin to collapse or migrate to find better waters. In the case of corals, a straightforward migration is not an option. They are rooted to the seafloor, forced to withstand their shifting environment. For coral reefs, a significant reduction in their support structure can cause them to lose their ability to sustain the enormous biodiversity that relies on them. A leading NOAA scientist explained that since the pre-industrial era, we have already approached or surpassed critical boundaries for what can be considered safe habitats for calcifying animals. Yet, many people globally remain unaware of this creeping crisis. Public attention tends to gravitate toward deforestation and melting glaciers, while the ocean's subtle changes go unnoticed. A decreasing pH of just a small fraction can create a cascade of biological consequences. The solutions, if they exist, require cutting our carbon dioxide emissions at large. While pH buffering can be tested on the small scale of a hatchery, it is less feasible for an entire coastline. Meanwhile, the push for global action remains sporadic, even as scientists highlight that ocean acidification has grown far more extensive than initially believed. That revelation is precisely why ocean acidification is often described as climate change's equally dangerous cousin. Where climate change is visible in melting sea ice or intensifying weather phenomena, acidification is more subtle but no less profound in its long-term impacts. When we talk about sinking small fortunes into ocean-based carbon capture or geoengineering solutions, we brush up against the cold reality that we are engaged in a massive chemistry experiment on the only oceanic world we know to be alive. This is not an idle metaphor. From the sea's surface to depths of hundreds of meters, scientists record measurable shifts in the ocean that stretch from polar seas to the tropics. The future of commercial fisheries, tourist economies reliant on coral reefs, and the broader marine biodiversity we cherish hangs in the balance. Consider the scale of the polar changes. At high latitudes, cold water holds more carbon dioxide and thus becomes acidic at a faster pace. Many species that thrive in those waters, such as certain types of plankton or the small sea snails called pteropods, form the bedrock of the polar and subpolar marine food chains. In the process, they feed fish that in turn feed seabirds, seals, and whales. So, if pteropods cannot form their shells, entire ecosystems tremble. Yet, the real tragedy is that these fragile species are rarely discussed outside scientific circles. Meanwhile, places like the Arctic might be on the front lines of a silent transformation. Knowing all this, we have to reflect on how the stability of polar ecosystems resonates through the entire global ocean. Moving southward, the story remains consistent. A separate wave of changes is hitting the west coast of North America. There, colder upwelled waters from the deep rise to the surface, already high in carbon dioxide content. When those waters merge with the carbon dioxide we have recently pumped into the atmosphere, the acidification effect compounds. Shellfish, from mussels to valuable crab species, basically get a double helping of corrosive stress. Their exoskeletons and shells become increasingly fragile, making it more difficult for them to fend off predators or survive in swiftly shifting conditions. This is not purely theoretical. The red king crab crisis in the Bering Sea stands as a dire example. If year after year the environment veers further away from what these animals need to reproduce, it does not take many generations to see population-level declines. But let us not overlook the tropics. The shading of coral reefs from brilliant multi-hued wonders to bleached and eroded scaffolds signals a larger breakdown. With the ocean's pH dropping, the ability of corals to secrete their skeletons is compromised. Called the rainforests of the sea, coral reefs host a dizzying variety of life, from sponges that filter water to fish that sport vibrant patterns. Now, the new research highlights a grim statistic. Around 43% or more of the suitable habitat for tropical or subtropical corals has vanished. That does not necessarily mean immediate extinction, but it does indicate that large swaths of the ocean no longer afford corals the secure environment they need. Given that reefs protect coastal regions from storm surges and support vital fisheries, the ramifications extend far beyond the reef itself. It can be easy to feel overwhelmed by such news. So many issues, from climate change to pollution, already demand our attention. Yet ocean acidification is firmly connected to both, and it impacts everyday life if you consider the ocean's role in the climate system and global economy. The fishing industry, a critical source of livelihoods in many coastal regions, relies on stable populations of crab, shrimp, mussels, oysters, and more. These creatures need to grow robust shells and, in many cases, they rely on planktonic food sources that themselves require stable conditions. If that supply chain dissolves, literally, coastal economies can come under tremendous strain. Over and again, we see that ocean acidification exerts its influence across vulnerable links in the marine ecosystem, whether that link is a tiny pteropod or a giant crab. Now, if you are intrigued enough to want more updates on the silent but massive transformations beneath the waves, consider subscribing or following our ongoing reports. By staying informed, you become part of a growing movement to keep ocean acidification in the public eye and to advocate for meaningful change. Going beyond the immediate doom and gloom, there is often talk of solutions both local and global. Some communities are planting seagrass or kelp forests, hoping to mitigate acidification at small scales. These marine plants absorb carbon dioxide from the water, creating pockets of higher pH that can help certain species flourish. Meanwhile, large-scale solutions revolve around drastically reducing our carbon footprint. According to scientists, ocean acidification will continue to intensify as long as atmospheric carbon dioxide levels keep climbing. While there may be a lag time of decades or even centuries, each year of unabated carbon emissions worsens the chemistry of our seas. Regardless of which marine species you root for, be it the graceful pteropods, the majestic corals, the succulent Dungeness crab, or the formidable red king crab, the same fundamental chemistry is at stake. The ocean can only buffer so much carbon dioxide before it changes qualitatively, and the research presented by these new studies underscores a startling truth. We have already altered the ocean's chemistry across large swaths of its surface and subsurface waters. The real question is what we decide to do next. Will we pivot swiftly toward cleaner energy and more sustainable fishing practices? Or will we muddle through as more marine populations cross their biological thresholds? Further, we have to consider that the ocean is a dynamic system, continuously mixing surface water with deeper currents. Over time, these changes in pH do not remain isolated to a single region. This means that even localized carbon dioxide cuts, while beneficial, might be partially offset by global emissions if those remain unmitigated. The entire planet is bound together by the ocean's circulatory flows, and major shifts in one region can ripple well beyond local boundaries. What complicates matters further is that many marine organisms are already grappling with warming waters. As temperatures rise, metabolic processes speed up, meaning some species require more oxygen or more food just to function. Couple that with decreasing carbonate ion availability, and you have a recipe for ecological rearrangements that are largely unprecedented in modern human history. The composition of marine communities can shift drastically, favoring species that can handle lower pH while those that rely heavily on stable carbonate saturation fade away. We would be remiss not to mention the economic angle for coastal communities that depend on seafood harvests. From crab fisheries in Alaska to shellfish farms in the Pacific Northwest to tropical reef tourism, diverse sectors rely on healthy marine ecosystems. When populations of red king crab plummet, it is not only a setback for those who catch them, but also for entire communities built around that fishery, from processing plants to shipping operations to local markets servicing restaurants worldwide. One shocking reality is that future generations could grow accustomed to a world where certain seafood delicacies are scarce or prohibitively expensive, all because of an invisible shift in ocean chemistry. Looking ahead, more studies are in the pipeline. NOAA, in partnership with universities and other organizations, continues to collect data on acidification hotspots. They are aligning that information with climate models to forecast the distribution of critical species in the coming decades. A big question is whether species can adapt in time or whether we will see mass migrations, mortalities, or sudden collapses in certain fisheries. Another question is how well coral reefs can face not only bleaching effects from warmer waters, but also the acidification that attacks their calcium carbonate skeletons. The synergy of these stressors is complex, but ongoing research aims to clarify the potential outcomes. Yes, the numbers are jarring. Nearly 40% of surface waters compromised, 60% of subsurface oceans altered. The dissolution of snail shells observed off the west coast of the United States in the mid-part of the past decade. The heartbreak of entire shellfish hatcheries forced to re-engineer their water supply. And the stunning revelation that ocean acidification could be correlated with up to 45% of the decline in red king crab populations since the turn of the millennium. Yet we must remember that awareness is the first step toward meaningful action. Perhaps a few decades from now, we will look back on this moment as the time we finally woke up. Or perhaps, if too little is done, we will carry regrets for not taking more decisive steps. As our underwater odyssey draws to a close, remember that the oceans are not merely a backdrop for human activity. They are a pivotal driver of planetary health. Fisheries feed millions, coral reefs anchor biodiversity hotspots, and stable ocean chemistry helps regulate climate. In the end, the quiet drama of ocean acidification could pose one of the greatest challenges to the continued abundance of marine resources, the stability of coastal economies, and the overall wellness of our global environment. Having followed this thread from the heartbreak of dissolving pteropods to the shuttered king crab fisheries in the Bering Sea, one truth stands out. If the ocean's chemistry is changing on such an immense scale, it is up to us to meet the challenge. Thank you for journeying with us into this often overlooked but vitally important realm. If there was a moment in our exploration that touched or surprised you, consider sharing this story with someone else. Spread the word about ocean acidification so more people recognize the necessity of safeguarding our waters. Our ocean is a world unto itself, bound within that shimmering blue envelope that covers most of our planet's surface. It has supported spectacular life forms for countless generations. Now, that captivating realm sits at a crossroads, shaped to a large extent by the actions of humankind. While many scientists caution that we are fast approaching a point of no return, it is not inevitable that we cross it blindly. The data showing dramatic changes in aragonite saturation is not a signal of doom without hope. Rather, it is a clarion call to reevaluate our relationship with carbon dioxide emissions, marine resource management, and scientific collaboration on a planetary scale. Our marine ecosystems, from the smallest sea snail to the grandest coral reef, hang in the balance, waiting to see if we can pivot in time. The choice is ours, here and now, as we stand at the threshold of the next chapter in Earth's story. Will we heed the warnings of NOAA's scientists and the consortium of researchers who have painstakingly documented the ocean's acidification over these decades? Or will we leave future generations to contend with oceans that are too corrosive for the breathtaking marine life we have always taken for granted? Only time will tell, but we still have a window to act before these changes become irreversible. The silent shift continues, but we can break the silence, drive awareness, and shepherd our oceans toward a healthier future.